Hey everyone. Any fans of this channel might have picked up by now that I love terrible reality TV shows. Any reality show really, but my favorites are food shows. And this isn't some recent thing either. I didn't jump on the bandwagon along with everyone else who discovered the joys of rotting their brains with Tiger King last March. No. I mean, Tiger King isn't even a cooking show unless you count Carol Baskin's husband. I started out soft with Gordon Ramsay hugging kids on MasterChef Jr.
Come on, bud, come here. I know you get upset. Come on, hey.
But soon graduated to the harder stuff when a few years ago Netflix had a ton of incredibly specific and bizarre cooking contests on, and I went hard on that. I'm talking about shows like Barbecue Pitmasters.
What this is a beef-based product. 1 spoon would make 2 gallons of soup. We're gonna put 2 spoons in here.
We're gonna put some beef taste into it.
This is just margarine.
And then when that wasn't enough, I went on to Deep Fried Masters.
I was born and bred in the corn dog lifestyle. I had the weight on my shoulders to come in here and win.
This round, I really have to step it up a notch. We're getting ready to take this to the next level. I'm doing a deep fried fluffernutter.
One thing that was honestly awesome about that show was that it was all about like the type of food you would buy at a county fair. And so one of the rules was that you had to be able to sell it for $10 or less and still turn a profit. So contestants couldn't just use a ton of super fancy ingredients to get an advantage.
What we have here is a waffle pop with chicken skin. You can buy chicken skins in bulk for around 60 cents a pound. So what you've got here is a high interest, low cost item.
I couldn't find the clip of this, but there's one episode where a guy makes like a deep fried beef Wellington or something, and the judges are just like, yeah, it tastes delicious, but the only part of a state fair this belongs in is the circus, because you're a goddamn clown if you think you can turn a profit selling this for $10 a piece. And then they just give the prize to some guy who threw like Kraft singles on a funnel cake. But today, we're gonna talk about the weirdest and just worst cooking show of them all. Cook Your Ass Off. The show only ran for 1 season, and it's pretty hard to track down now, but it's absolutely amazing. The premise is that it's a cooking contest to make people healthier, but they do everything in just the worst way they could. So first of all, each episode is centered around helping someone who's unhealthy, but the types of people who sign up for this show are ones who are already pretty health conscious. So the people they have on to help will just be like a retired firefighter with a family history of heart disease.
Dean is a firefighter, but today he's here to put out a different type of fire. Many generations of Dean's family suffer from heart disease, and today he's here to put an end to that pattern. And
it's like, for sure, these people would be a lot healthier if they improved their diets, but like, we're talking about a schlubby middle-aged guy whose doctor told him to cut down on fried foods.
My blood pressure and cholesterol was elevated enough to warrant being put on medication.
But the show needs drama, so to raise the stakes, they talk about them like this.
He has a whole host of conditions. He is in a vicious cycle of poor health. And as much as I hate to say it, it's going to kill him.
It's especially frustrating because very often it's not even that the people on the show don't know how to eat healthy food. It'll just be someone who doesn't have time to cook, so they eat a lot of takeout.
Jill is a busy mom of 4 kids who wants to start on a healthy journey for herself and her family.
Having 4 kids, it's just really hard to find the time to feed myself anything healthy.
Tracy's a celebrity hairstylist who's put her health on the back burner for her career and is now battling health issues.
I'm always on the go. I never know where I'm gonna be, who I'm gonna meet, or what I'm gonna eat.
Like, this busy mom or this lady who travels for work aren't overweight because they don't know that you can have salads for dinner.
Are you ready to incorporate things like fruit for snacks? I love the idea of a warm salad, and I love that you introduced the idea of a warm salad. It's not just cook vegetables on the side at dinner. You can really have a whole salad for a meal.
This is already not a great premise for a show, but it gets so much weirder. The show has 3 judges. The first is one of a rotating panel of judges who critique the food just based on how it tastes, standard stuff you would see on any cooking show. They're usually pretty friendly and offer constructive criticism. No notes, they're doing a great job. The second judge is nutritionist Cheri Glassman, who gives me real vampire who hasn't aged in 200 years energy. Her criticisms are always so fucked, because she basically takes off points anytime the chef includes any salt, fat, or starch.
Daniel actually has hoisin sauce.
Right away there, I'm thinking that is a lot of sugar going on. I can't let you off the hook for the white bun. And I know you liked it, Tracy. I love corn. Why the 3 forms of fat here with the corn? You could have thrown in some more veggies in there, mushrooms, something a little hearty that could replace a meat.
You don't want to scare off someone too much. I'm hoping that the baby steps bring you to the big steps.
Danielle, tell us what you think about Chef Luis's dish.
The fish, I could taste a little bit of the fishiness, and it had a couple of bones in it.
Well, I'm just smiling that you used turmeric.
It's also her job to explain how unhealthy the person they're supposed to be helping is. And she also makes a lot of little jabs where she jokes about how much healthier and skinnier she is than them.
The fact that you just introduced this plant source of protein to them is fantastic. And they did really remind me of what that stuffed potato would probably taste like if I ever had one. This wouldn't fill me. And I have a lot, sorry to say, less pounds on me.
And speaking of the person they're supposed to help, they also sit in as the third judge. This is weird for a couple of reasons. For one thing, they aren't TV personalities, and so whether they like the food or not, they usually just give very generic, polite feedback.
Everything was really good. The alligator was really good. I thought it was going to be tough, but it wasn't. It was like a chicken replacement.
I like what you did with the apricots. They've got a nice flavor, good spice to it. Obviously, we're missing the cheesecake component, which is that's the big part. So kind of hard to tell how they would all go together.
Imagine if American Idol was hosted by Simon Cowell, Paula Abdul, and just Jeff. But also, sometimes they'll just be an incredibly picky eater and not try the food because it has something in it that the contestants had no way of knowing they didn't like.
Yeah, I won't even try the green beans, though.
Not even with the mash on it?
Nah.
He's the pickiest adult eater I've ever encountered.
What do you think about Roxanne's dish?
I'm just not really a fan of yogurt.
My entire dish was based on yogurt, and he hates yogurt, so...
But there's a very important reason why they're a judge, and that's because while the grand prize is $50,000, anyone who makes it past round 1 gets to become this unhealthy person's mentor, which sounds like they're just supposed to be their nutritionist / personal chef.
You're all competing to be Danielle's mentor and to move on to our semifinals. The chef that wins here today will get the opportunity to work with Roger after the competition is over. Whoever wins here today gets the opportunity to mentor Angel and develop a meal plan just for him.
Throughout every episode, they all talk about how much they want to work with this person to change their diet.
If Angel was at a different stage in his transformation, we could do some really fun things together.
I think that she needs me and my baby steps to get her on the path to changing her eating habits.
We have to make it so she really can do it, because I don't want to waste my time with people who can't change.
And cool, but that's a ton of work, which it doesn't sound like you're getting paid for at all. They never explain this, and when all the winners come back for the semifinals, they don't talk at all about how their mentorships went. And so, because of this format, the types of people who sign up to compete are absolute freaks.
My passion for healthy food trumps everything else in my life. I'm very competitive and I can be very intense. The people are dying. It's a slow suicide and it's my responsibility to save them.
I recently got into the paleo and/or caveman diet. You didn't see any fat caveman, did you?
The challenges in each round involve turning the person they're trying to help's favorite food into something super healthy, and they all just have amazing reactions to these extremely innocuous junk foods.
They're basically fried dumplings stuffed with potatoes and vegetables, really crunchy and packed with loads of flavor.
That's something I don't think of as a snack.
It's a cheeseburger. I'm gonna find a cheeseburger no matter where I'm at.
When I see that burger is covered in ketchup, I immediately think, Tracy, we have a lot of work to do.
They want me to recreate something that replicates the cheesy fries. Ain't gonna happen. I decide I'm gonna make a tuna wrap and a smoothie. If I'm gonna save this person's life, I need her to understand that there is no version of cheese fries that are gonna be healthy.
My favorite snack is nachos. I wanna throw up right now. I'm like, how I'm going to change this?
Okay, also, those last two guys are absolutely amazing. For one thing, they just flat out refuse to make anything remotely resembling the original dish.
All right, so I saw we had some tuna out, right?
Yeah,
What's going on with that?
I want to do a nice wrap for her.
Okay, and how is this sort of inspired by the cheese fry?
It's not.
I'm thinking about making a compressed watermelon with a little ceviche, you know.
Oh, we see truffle oil.
I'm still not quite sure what this has to do with nachos.
For me, wild truffle oil, I mean, it's delightful.
And they're also just such assholes the whole time.
I'm looking at my dish and there's no way, you know, I cannot win this.
Everything about my dish looks better than my competitors.
I'm looking at Chris' plate and I'm thinking, you know, he's going again for Roger and he might really enjoy that plate of, you know, kind of hospital food.
Behind. Tick, tick, tock. Feel like I'm agave all day. So I talk to myself, hum a tune, just try and see if I can make any slight, subtle distraction. Behind.
Cooking with Ian's kind of challenging.
Now, all this is pretty wild, but the thing that really makes this show special is a little bit subtler. The time limit. The chefs are given 20 minutes in the first round and 30 in the next two rounds. And you know how in like most cooking shows, the time limits are probably fake or at least somewhat flexible? Cook Your Ass Off doesn't do that. In almost every episode, someone either has to cut corners to get their dish done in time, has to leave something out because they couldn't get it on the plate, or very often fully just doesn't finish.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop cooking.
I can get half my components on.
I gotta get my smoothie down and my compote on the plate, or else I'm screwed.
3, 2, 1. Hands up, stop cooking.
90 seconds to go. The burgers are just going in the pan.
Get everything you can on the plate, chefs. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop cooking, no more, stop.
I get one of these black bean burgers on the plate.
Louisa is in her oven right now checking those muffins.
I don't know. Need a little color on that.
They're still raw. I'm out of time. It's just not working. I just can't believe that I didn't get the second dish ready in time.
This happens so often that not finishing doesn't even really impact your score that much.
You know, that little shot glass packed more flavor than the other two dishes combined. You know, her downfall is she may not know how to work in these time constraints.
And the best part is that all the recipes are supposed to be available online. They mention a couple times how all the recipes are available on upwave.com, which used to be the website for the now defunct network Cook Your Ass Off originally aired on.
Thank you to all of our chefs. Thank you for creating recipes that everyone can find and utilize on upwave.com.
It's super easy.
Yeah, sorry, behind.
And you can find more recipes like that on upwave.com.
This is the type of recipe that you can find on upwave.com that you can make at home Less than 20 minutes, obviously.
Given how fucked some of these dishes turned out,
I've got 2 full cakes to plate, and I start trying to cut into that second cake, and it's not finished. It's not cooked. So I have to use the edges of my first pancake.
I desperately want to see what the recipe looks like for things like 2 thin strips of what were supposed to be chocolate pancakes.
What have you made to replace the candy bar?
This is an almond flour pancake with raw chocolate, cherries, and coconut.
And while obviously I haven't seen the time limits mentioned in any of the promotional material that I've looked at, they obviously knew that this was a big part of the show, since the name Cook Your Ass Off obviously in part refers to the fact that they need to cook really fast, and even the logo of the show is meant to look like a clock that's on fire. Fast clock. The idea of the time limit is to make them cook things that the people they're supposed to help could easily whip up at home, but very few of the chefs cook anything remotely simple. Instead, they cook incredibly complicated dishes, but because of the time limit, they do so in a way that's also extremely dangerous. Like, contestants get hurt.
I get to the grill, my corn looks beautiful, I put it in my bowl, running up the stairs, and I missed a step.
Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, it's a car that just went by. At this point, you're probably thinking, wow, that guy's bulletproof argument really challenged a lot of my preconceived notions and caused me to reconsider a lot of core beliefs of mine, and I need to do some self-reflection. I guess YouTube videos really can sway people's political views, but not so fast, because while this show is very bad, something about it stuck in my brain, and so convincing you it's bad isn't quite enough. I want to show you exactly why this show is so fucked. And to do that, we're going to set Cook Your Ass Off aside for now and instead look into how and why cooking shows like this exist to begin with. In this video, we're going to talk about food media. That's right, this was all an introduction. I tricked you.
I want to cook with you. I want to cook with you. I want to cook with you. Let's get cooking.
The first food shows on TV or radio were all instructional, and the queen of this was the great Julia Child. By the way, throughout this video, I'm gonna be fairly critical of some pretty beloved chefs. I should, first of all, maybe say that until March 2020, I was and had basically always been a line cook, and that I am still an avid consumer of food media. Like, I love this stuff, but there's nothing wrong with enjoying someone's work while still being critical of it, or in the case of this video, more so critical of the circumstances which contributed to these people's success. Also, for regular viewers of my channel, this video isn't gonna take a turn and suddenly be about capitalism. There's no like bit or setup here. I'm unironically making a video about cooking shows. Child, after studying cooking at Le Cordon Bleu, taught those French techniques that she had learned to Americans as the host of her show, The French Chef. The show was a massive success, owed not just to her cooking skills, but to the fact that she was an amazing host. Like, honestly, she rules. If you've never seen her old videos, check them out. Now, Julia Child is often held up as a feminist figure for earning her stripes in the notoriously sexist world of French cooking, which is definitely fair, but also, she wasn't exactly a feminist figure in her time, and that likely contributed to her success. Following World War II, many women like Child weren't down to go back to being housewives after having entered the workforce during the war, and so, as a pushback against second-wave feminism, food became the battleground for a new kind of war. A culture war. Restaurants would advertise that all their cooks were women, not as a feminist thing, but instead they'd have slogans that say things like, "the kind of food you should be getting at home," which is just so fucked up in so many different ways. How'd they take a nice thing like representation and turn it into a gimmick restaurant somehow more incel than Hooters? Like, first of all, imagine being one of those cooks and having your boss basically advertise that he hired you to own the libs. And then also, just think about how much of an asshole a guy would have to be to go there with his wife, just the whole meal spitefully saying how they wouldn't have to eat there if she'd stop going to those damn meetings. Anyway, while, again, not denying that Child was a total badass, her success can in part be attributed to the fact that she presented a traditional vision of how women were supposed to behave. Julia Child is definitely the most iconic, but the blueprint of her show was the standard for cooking media for about 30 years. A woman on a set resembling a home kitchen teaching a presumed female audience how to cook for their families. Now, we'll come back to cooking shows soon, but before we do, in order to understand the shift that was about to take place, we'll have to change focus away from the glamorous world of TV and towards what we might think of as the back of house, if you will. Talking about the gritty underbelly that is restaurant culture. So, it's almost 6 a.m. Let's get clocked in and start prepping for brunch. Would be cool if I just did the rest of the video with this mask on. This is how Tim Pool walks around every day. Like, I bought this mask as like part of a Halloween costume, but the thing is that like, it's actually like a pretty decent quality mask. And so when my other ones are in the wash, I'll wear this one and then go outside and people will give me looks and I'll forget that I look like a serial killer. American cuisine, or at least respected American cuisine, is actually a relatively recent phenomenon. Until maybe the 70s or so, fine dining for Americans meant French dining. Being a chef at that time meant being a French guy with one of those big white hats, or at least someone who'd been trained by them. Americans were instead cooks. Think sweaty, fat guys chain smoking while flipping burgers, or else ethnic mothers, which at that time was bad, not authentic. The first thing that changed was that while all the fancy restaurants were owned by French guys, they were run by Americans who eventually got sick of working the line and decided to open their own restaurants. These were working class Americans, often the children of immigrants, and for them, cooking provided an opportunity for upward mobility. One of the cool things that happened here was that these new American chefs began to celebrate their backgrounds and made what we now think of when we talk about authentic cooking. This led to Americans becoming more into this new kind of cooking that's true to their roots. By the way, I'm being glib because I think it's often pretty pretentious how this food gets talked about, but this type of cooking is legit really cool and way more interesting than just generic fusion dishes. Anyways, as this new chef arose, because their food was all about their identity, diners started to be more interested in who was behind the swinging doors of the kitchen. Chefs became a type of person to pay attention to. Cooking became a cool and viable career path, and this drew in newer chefs. These were 80s boomers with fancy degrees and fancy office jobs who needed something real, man. Gassed up on some Fight Club shit, these fancy bad boys were bored of Wall Street and office jobs. They didn't want 9-to-5 lives like they were supposed to have. They wanted to drink all night, then show up at 7 a.m. the next day to receive a produce order while chain smoking and still drunk. These are people like Anthony Bourdain, who dropped out of Vassar to go to the Culinary Institute of America, Alfred Portail, Barry Wine, Charlie Trotter, and here's the thing, these guys were used to getting what they wanted. Turns out these pampered, college-educated white boys were exactly the type of people who were really good at getting famous. So while the first American chefs were working class, these career changers were the ones who actually made cooking cool. Because of them, cooking became seen as a profession and an avocation. It wasn't about hard, menial, degrading labor anymore. It was an art. This all also changed the culture of American kitchens. They became a weird hybrid of the French system of rigid hierarchy passed down for like 200 plus years, now mixed with some good old-fashioned American can-do whatever the fuck I want to blue-collar hustle. People like Bourdain describe it as the last bastion of cowboy culture, and there's something very funny and also not untrue about the image of the kitchen where people party like rock stars and are sometimes literally at each other's throats, all to make just the daintiest food. There is absolutely this chef culture where the kitchen is a proving ground, and I for sure fell into that a little bit. I remember having this stupid contempt for people who couldn't hack it while just taking so much pride in being covered in cuts and burns and developing carpal tunnel. This kind of culture can kind of serve as a way to glamorize things that people should in fact be complaining about. Like, instead of bragging about working 18 hours straight with the flu, restaurant workers should be demanding their boss hire more people and pay them enough to stay on because no one should have to work like that. If this didn't give it away, I'm a pretty shitty employee, not because I'm a bad cook, but because at most jobs, once I'm out of probation, I start talking to people about forming a union. Another way that the romanticized vision of the kitchen as a battleground rubs me the wrong way is also who does the romanticizing. Remember how so many of those chefs who made cooking cool came from well-off backgrounds? In Anthony Bourdain's book, Kitchen Confidential, he begins it by talking about spending his childhood summers in France, falling in love with good food. And then he writes stuff like this.
American cooks, meaning born in the USA, possibly school-trained, culinarily sophisticated types, are a lazy, undisciplined, and worst of all, high-maintenance lot. No one understands and appreciates the American dream of hard work leading to material rewards better than a non-American. The Ecuadorian, Mexican, Dominican, and Salvadorian cooks I've worked with over the years make most CIA-educated white boys look like clumsy, sniveling little punks.
And it's like, you are one of those spoiled American chefs, dude. Or he says how undocumented immigrants can handle verbal abuse because they grew up tough or something, and it's like, yeah, they also can't afford to lose their job and don't have any recourse if their employer is abusive. It's not really a profound revelation to be like, it's amazing how much abuse someone can endure when there's nothing they can do to stop you. Must be because they really believe in the American dream. He also says stuff like this, which, in fairness, is par for the course, but also definitely aged poorly.
A good line cook never shows up late, never calls in sick, and works through pain and injury. You want loyalty from your line cooks. Somebody who wakes up with a scratchy throat and a slight fever and thinks it's okay to call in sick is not what I'm looking for.
This line is really funny because, to me, it honestly just feels like Yeah, that's how that works. But showing it to anyone I know who's never been a cook, they thought it could have been from a Batman villain describing his henchmen. This all just reminds me of how I think it was like November 2019, I got the flu, and my boss at the time told me that it'd be incredibly unprofessional of me not to show up to work anyway. Then 4 months later, servers were getting chastised for wanting to wash their hands after touching customers' cutlery, and all the hand sanitizer got put into a locked box we couldn't get to without asking. And speaking of toxicity, there's also the fact that kitchens generally are incredibly sexist. It seems like one of the things that both the American and French influences on kitchen culture could agree on was that they both loved being sexist sacks of shit. But this also has to do with these new chefs who need to make cooking manly to be taken seriously as a profession. As Gwen Hyman writes,
if meaningful labor over the stoves had previously been limited in the cultural imagination to foppish Frenchmen, and on another register mothers, the work of making cooking new was also the work of making it manly. This was essential to the transformation of cooking into a viable career path in line with the American dream. Serious work of the hand must, in our cultural imagination, necessarily be disassociated with the home, with the feminine, with perceived amateurism. There was nothing homey and nurturing about the new cooking or the new kitchens. Instead, these chefs made themselves tough, rough-edged, sexy, in a very hetero, rebel without a cause, cowboy boots and blue jeans kind of way.
But rampant sexism wasn't the only way these guys professionalized cooking. While previous generations of chefs would stay in the back of house, increased public interest in cooking, as well as some chefs' ambitions, led to them being put center stage as the main attraction in the form of the celebrity chef. In some cases, these chefs would hire their own PR teams to advertise themselves, although very often that would all be set up by the restaurant, which the chef was merely an employee of. I think this makes celebrity chefs a bit of a weird thing. They're different from basically any other kind of celebrity. The standard story of an American celebrity is that they come from humble beginnings or whatever, usually not though, and then strike it rich and basically have an easy life from then on. Like, sure, actors work, but like, that looks like, if not an easy job, a pretty cushy one. But also, the fantasy of celebrity is that if they don't want to work, they wouldn't have to. But that's not how celebrity chefs work. Their status as celebrity chefs depends on them being constantly busy doing, or at least appearing to be doing, what amounts to really hard labor. Even if they aren't working the line anymore, although the hardcore chef's table types definitely are to some extent. It's complicated further by the fact that most chefs work for someone else, either in the sense that being a chef means catering to the whims of the patrons of the restaurant, or quite literally, they have a boss who owns their restaurant and sometimes owns their whole brand. As Dorothy Can Hamilton, former CEO of the International Culinary Institute, writes,
chefs today are no longer just cooks. They are multifaceted businesses with investors. Very few chefs bring themselves up by their own bootstraps. When the chef is an employee, it is the company he or she works for that hires the PR machines and designers and makes the heavy investment needed to build a recognized brand. If all of that is successful and the chef becomes a star, they feel ownership in creating that chef.
Also, I just have to talk about this. That quote was from a very interesting article where she reflected on the state of cooking and what needs to change with how new chefs are trained. But in the article, she pretends that it's an interview and asks herself questions, often very flattering ones.
In your more than 10 years in leading culinary education, What changes have you seen in chef training? Well, knife skills, organization, product knowledge, these are just a few of the skill sets that professional chefs have had to master since the 17th century.
It doesn't really affect the article at all. It's just an incredibly strange thing to do. That's not even the weirdest article I read for this video. Remember that quote from earlier? This is from the same article.
Celebrity chefhood echoes the long-established metaphorical alignment of human food with human flesh. Whereas, in the domestic sphere, food produced by a maternal figure may be read as mother's milk, in the transubstantiation of the restaurant, the diner may order the foie gras or the ravioli, but what he is imaginatively consuming, in a sense, what brings him to the celebrity restaurant in the first place, what he truly seeks out, is the chef himself. As Maggie Kilgore has noted, the act of anthrophagy is a means of taking in the power of the other, of consuming that which constitutes the self of the subject, and thus of reinventing or expanding oneself and one's own strength.
That's just vor. Why is every academic who writes about food such a freak? Again, very interesting article, makes some very insightful points. Also, that line's not about her wanting to vor Gordon Ramsay. But setting that shit aside, let's check back in with the front of house. In the 90s, food media began to change. I don't know what's worse, looking like Tim Pool or a chef bro. In the 90s, food media began to explode, and in 1993, the Food Network was launched. While this started out as the same instructional cooking shows hosted by women, by the end of the 90s, most of those kinds of shows were moved to mornings and during the day, while a new kind of cooking show took over primetime.
On Emerald Live! Welcome back, everybody. Emerald Lagasse here, and if for some reason maybe you fell off another planet, this is Emerald Live. I love making kicked up hot chocolate. So I'm gonna make a kicked up hot chocolate for you tonight. If you're having a rough day and you need to kick it up a little, what I recommend would be to add a little bit of that Kahlua, just in case you want it. One more notch. We take a little rum from Jamaica.
The new kitchen bad boys who'd emerged as celebrities took over the Food Network. Shows hosted by guys like Emerald Lagasse, Bobby Flay, and Jamie Oliver. And instead of cooking on a set that resembled a home kitchen, these would be shot in front of a cheering audience, viewing it as like a spectacle. It kind of reminds me of how the only kind of cooking that boomer men know how to do is barbecue, or else maybe something fancy that they only bust out during the holidays? While Julia Child's show was based on the premise that anyone could, with a bit of practice and patience, master these pretentious French techniques, these shows instead depicted cooking as like a rare skill that needed to be marveled at. Something else that changed here was that these shows turned away from the tutorial format. While plenty of them still did have recipes you could follow, you started to see the rise of food porn. Depictions of food that's meant to be admired but can't be emulated by the viewer, either because of a lack of skill or extremely specialized equipment. I personally don't have any problem with food porn when it's just describing some amazing food, like in shows like Chef's Table.
He's arrived at his own formula for what being a 3 Michelin star is about.
I do hate it, though, when shows act as though they're providing a tutorial for something, but like their barbecue recipe or whatever is impossible unless you own an industrial smoker. But while badass chef dudes took over at the end of the 90s, they were replaced in the early 2000s by my shit cooking contests. Iron Chef premiered in America in 2001 and became a smash hit in part because of its camp appeal.
5 years ago, a man's fantasy became reality in a form never seen before. Kitchen Stadium, a giant cooking arena. The motivation for spending his fortune to create Kitchen Stadium was to encounter new original cuisines, which could be called true artistic creations.
Soon after, Top Chef aired and turned the cooking contest from unconnected episodes into a season-long arc.
So Tom, who's going to be competing on Top Chef and who's going to be going home?
This cemented the format of the cooking contest, and they've been a mainstay of food media ever since. In a way, it makes a lot of sense that these shows would become so popular. Narratively, they're much more interesting than instructional content. As Tasha Oren writes, the narrative of an instructional cooking show can be thought of as an answer. Here's how to make this. But the narrative of a cooking contest is a question. Will he succeed? With that being said, while these shows aren't instructional per se, they do teach the viewer. However, instead of teaching them how to cook food, what they teach is how to judge it. I doubt I'm alone in that one of the things I find most fun when watching these shows is talking shit about a dish someone made, even though I certainly couldn't have done better. But I think the most interesting thing Oren points out is that while early instructional shows presented cooking as an act of love to feed your family, and later food porn shows presented cooking as an art and artisanship, cooking contests are unique in how they present cooking as labor. No one in a cooking contest is doing it for art. They're doing it for the prize money that they talk about at the beginning of every episode.
The $50,000 is looming over me like a big old golden rainbow. I need this, need this, need this.
Coming back to Cook Your Ass Off now, I don't think I've ever seen a better representation of being in the shit as a line cook than the frantic panic on display in this show. These people aren't cooking in a beautiful, perfectly stocked kitchen. It's cramped. They're shoulder to shoulder bumping into each other.
Behind. Behind. Behind.
Yep. Whoa.
I go to plug in the immersion blender.
You have a plug over here?
To thicken the Alfredo sauce. And there's no plug near the stove.
No? Behind. Behind again. Behind again. Hot stuff.
People cutting their hands and throwing a Band-Aid and a finger condom on, then getting back to work.
So I'm chopping up some jicama to add another veggie to the plate. Oh. My knuckle, I must have nicked it, and I had to stop what I was doing, grab a Band-Aid, put on a glove.
Or grabbing hot food with their bare hands, then running up the stairs and eating shit.
6! I've gotta get everything on this plate. I'm in trouble.
2, 1.
They dropped a calamari.
Is weird for a cooking show, but feels unbelievably realistic for anyone who's worked as a cook. At one point, a woman walks away from some taco shells she was heating up on the stove and they catch fire. And it's like, I have literally done exactly the same thing. One of the absolute craziest parts of that show is that the kitchen isn't stocked very well. In one episode, they're supposed to make a healthy version of fried chicken, so one guy just runs down and takes all the chicken breasts so no one else can use them.
Chef Scott has grabbed all of the chicken breasts.
Wow.
Pantry is first come, first serve, so I mean, that part of the game is going to get.
I run to grab my protein. There's no chicken breast.
all the chicken breasts are gone.
Did you take all the chicken breasts over there, buddy?
I sure did.
In one episode, they have to make a burger, and of course, the kitchen only has one meat grinder, so one guy grabs it, and the other cook who wants to use it is just fucked.
Unfortunately, Ian grabs the meat grinder, now I'm stuck with the food processor. The food processor might overwork my chicken, but I have no choice.
And this isn't even seen as like cheating or bad sportsmanship. The judges are just like, interesting strategy, sucks to suck.
I'm a burger purist. If you're gonna do a riff off of a burger, it's gotta be ground. Or it has to have that
totally
texture.
agree with you.
I think what I like about cooking contests, particularly the bad ones like Cook Your Ass Off, is that they perfectly represent the experience of working at a terrible restaurant. This is the representation we need. Lastly, something I haven't really seen talked about in all the weird papers I read for this video is that another part of why there are so many of these cooking reality shows, and reality shows in general, is because they're really cheap to make. Like, not only did Cook Your Ass Off cut corners in their production, but while the grand prize of $50,000 is obviously a lot of money, that's way less than they would have had to spend if they hired unionized talent to make 12 episodes of TV. I talked about this a little bit in my video about crappy jobs, but in a paper by Gabriel Winant, they note how these types of shows that glorify shitty working conditions like Dirty Jobs, Deadliest Catch, and more abstractly Cook Your Ass Off, can only be made by themselves exploiting those shitty working conditions. So I said that this wasn't going to be a video where I'd talk about capitalism, and I fucking lied. Let's go. As much as I do love me some trash TV, and it certainly doesn't make you a bad person to consume this type of media, these shows are predicated on and in service to the toxic, bigoted, and exploitative nature of the way we consume food. Something that comes up a lot with the way that celebrity chefs are viewed is that the entire way they run their business, good or bad, is seen purely in service of them fulfilling their artistic vision or an expression of their personal philosophy of what food means to them, and not in any way examining the conditions of the people who work for them. It reminds me of the way, at least here in Ontario, any discussions around the effects of the lockdowns we've been perpetually in and out of for over a year now are based around small business owners and never small business employees. So for anyone who's still watching this who hates reality TV, a good way to fight it might be supporting unions. Imagine an episode of Hell's Kitchen where Gordon Ramsay yells at someone and then spends the next 30 minutes negotiating with the cooks union to keep his position. Nobody would watch that. As for people like me who love garbage, well, I'd say losing bad TV shows is a small price to pay for a more democratic society. Thanks for watching. This video was made possible thanks to the help and generosity of my wonderful, beautiful patrons. Big thank yous to all of you, including Christopher Tubbs, Star, Hannah Diacoman Rose, Royal Road, Megan Gwen, Rachel Ann, Acid Summer, Niels Abelgard, Makubus Goobus, Isso Kuhn, Slithers, Eric Walker, Scarebank, Jasmine Wellner, Alec J. Radecki, Caleb F. Fales, Ramsey Barghouti, Daniel Jocelyn, Thighs and French Fries, Weapon X Reject, Comrade Sai, Arnez Calling, Kells, Isaac Slatton, Baron Golgrita Af Crystal Krona, Casey Kutniak, Clement Chutskoff, G. Purr, Jacob Friedman, Jamie, Jubion, Kenzie G, Nick Corpius, Ruby, AK, Bean the Ruse, Miko Ballarice, Serena Sinclair, J. Fraser Cartwright, Heather Boning, Cody Stevens, Evan, Phil Argeria, Morgan, Tony Weiss, Buzz Killer, Charles Akawa, Oh Death, Please No, Alfonso, Julius Soares, Just Ono, Max Goranson, Nemo, Relaxo, Sif, Tim Hoffsummer, Becca B, Conrad Fox, Gamp, Good Poon Hates Cops, that's solid Poon then, Cameron Hussein, Dormitory Fedora, Rome, Stu, Sean McIntyre, Tesla Deathray, Soyborn, Max Elford, Shiloh Sojourner Sachs, Odo, Jack Crawford, Rob Rory, Bill Nibbs, H. Johnson, Alex Arcudi, Christian Bulhewis, Eggsbox, Kashal T, Kennedy, Loline, Lonely Party, Muppet Mistake, QTA10, Ron Doofdad, Anime Avatar, Sarcasm Jaime, Stitching Ghost, Caitlin Hunt, Maddie G, Thomas Brereton, Tori, Trenton Coleman, Christina Davies, Communist Android, Judd from Splatoon, Aldo Calrissian, Garen Birch, Ollie Coates, Marina Dove, Netin Echo, Alex Machin, Alexandra Falls, Alistair Butcher, Bennett G. Spicer, Con Tot, Dylan Robinson, Eric Pruchnow, Kevin Ritter, Christian, Mackenzie Lyer, Miguel Crespo, Retro and Chill, Roderick Plass, Simon, Subsystem of Society, Magpie Magus, The Silver Samaritan, Thomas Swords, Tyler Ulrich, Stephen, Kanika, Elizabeth, Queen of Printers, Gregoria 3, Nathan Davies, Eric Pedden, Russell Gilchrist, Katzer Neat, Helia, Carrie M, Emma Nay, Maurice Robert, Erica Sumrall, Bruni, Cafe Softy, Cassie Young, E.H. Sawyer, Jonathan McNabb, Red, Gina, Aislinn, Divergent Descent, Ellis McPickle, Expat Cat Dad, Jerry, John Mertz, Julian, Mitch Kennedy, Randy, Rioting Pacifist, Roanoke, Oryx Blibble, 21st Century Bill of Rights, AC Cirillos, Chris, Esri Dax, Goncha 420, Leah Lane, Lucid Zen, Madeleine, Maya Solmiran, Shaky, S, Frunz, Kill the State, Miriam Marxista, Nix and Checkers, Oft Wears Hats, Rude Melon, Rye Dripping, and that's all, folks. I love you all.